So Zach Abraham, Chief Investment Officer, Bulwark Capital Management, is going to join us. And Starbucks, man, utter Nazis. I mean, this is so utterly abusive to employees. So we'll talk about that with Zach, because, of course, he's on boards of companies, and he's a fiduciary, invests my money, our family's money, other people's money. So we'll talk about that. Plus, he went through on his Twitter, and he was Professor Zach. Unrealized gains and losses on investment securities. And what does that mean for us? And why is it insane? And why do we care? Then this. What we're lacking in credit creation is being more than accounted for with 7% deficits. Let's talk about that. That seems rather important leading up into an election and all. But I think we'll also get quickly into what things can we look at to determine how bad or good the economy is. Because the people who run things would rather us not see those things. We'll talk about this with the help of our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@the-Todd-Herman-Show, and, of course, with the great grace of God Almighty. Let's begin.
The Todd Herman Show is 100% disapproved by big pharma, technocrats, and tyrants everywhere. No. From the high mountains of free America, here's the Emerald City exile, Todd Herman.
Today is the day the Lord has made, and these are the times through which God has decided we shall live. Zach Abraham joins me. He's the Chief Investment Officer of Bulwark Capital Management. I'll know I'll learn to speak someday, maybe when I'm not multitasking, looking at a stupid computer that will not behave. Zach, welcome back to the Todd Herman Show.
Always good to be back.
So, man, I don't know what to say about these people at Starbucks and what they're doing to these employees. This is unexpected, and it's not like me to want to come out and defend Starbucks, given what they are politically, et cetera. But they came out with a heck of an announcement. And do you want to break it to the people, or you want me to?
Yeah, you take it. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, because I'm the professional broadcaster. Although you have a great big radio show. I don't know what I'm talking about. Your radio show is huge. All right, it's this. Starbucks warns corporate staff, show up in office or get fired. The golden era of remote work seems to be ending. Starbucks is the latest mega corporation to enforce a return to office mandate for white-collar workers. People have got to revolt on this thing, Zach. I mean, there's no way around it. You have to be able to work from home.
This reminds me of the old line that from time to time, the tree of liberty, blood of tyrants, patriots, right? we've gone over the event horizon of madness here, and I was reading it, not just Starbucks. That this is the same headline is occurring in another company as well, and it's escaping me right now where it was. And this goes to, I think you and I have discussed it before, but we've talked about it on our show as well, which is, look, you didn't just turn a corner and all of a sudden this is a work from home economy. I think that they're working from home going forward will be more prevalent in certain industries, less prevalent in others. It is a permanent fixture in the sense it's not going away, but there are some jobs as an employer. There are some jobs where there is a noticeable advantage of having people together, collaboration, talking, communication. People like, we can do it on Zoom, and it's like I come on, right? It's not even close to the same.
Yeah,
and
there's something to be said for proximity to human beings, right?
yeah,
And now my radio company, when I worked in morning radio in Seattle, you and I worked in the same building. You weren't there as often as I was. They made this attempt to have us all come into the office place, and a lot of us were working out of state because of COVID and all that. And at that point, I understood what they were trying to do. We need to have a collegial workspace. We need people to work collaboratively. And I was talking to the HR lady, and I have no disparaging remarks to make whatsoever, not just because I signed the non-disparagement agreement that's binding, because I don't. But I talked to this lady. I dearly love her. Great, great human being, HR lady. I said, but people hate each other. She said, well, but that's what we're trying to fix. I go, no. You can't fix. You can't fix an office that's 85% radical socialist communist and 14% conservative and 2% libertarian or 1% libertarian. You can't do it. You understand something. People hate each other. That's gone. You can't fix that. You'd have to completely change the office out and bring in absolutely new people and gut it as a building. But do you think working in proximity to one another prevents that? If you have healthy, decent leadership, I mean, you guys review leadership. You look at leadership teams all the time.
Yeah, no, look, div- wild to live in a world that is literally where the woke agenda is now calling into question the efficacy of Brown versus the Board of Education, right?
Right.
Which is, the resegregation of college
Right.
campus, right? So, I mean, you've got to take that into context. Yes, in this world, I think that division and separation only exacerbates the issues. I think it is great to have, for instance, um, it's easy for us to myopically look through a lens, but let's roll with it. Um, one of the I think one of the easiest over time, one of the easiest ways to bridge the political divide, for instance, to convince, let's say, young, really woke people that anybody that disagrees with them isn't evil. Let them work in an office with these people and see that they can give money to poor people. They can give to charitable causes. They're good people. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
it humanizes things, and on all levels, um, that's always a helpful thing. I think it's so often or not we characterize people that disagree with us with the most outrageous version of that disagreement, rather than seeing the normal, well-intended people that actually make up the vast majority of supporters of whatever that, you know what I'm saying, whatever idea that is. um and we can even do it as a little thought experiment here. The average Kamala Harris voter, the average, is not somebody that wants to decimate the Bill of Rights or rip down free markets, right? The average Kamala Harris voter, um the average one, weights certain things. Now, whether they're right to do this or not, we can discuss it a lot. Obviously, I think most of the listeners know your and my opinions on this, but they're not evil people. The average Kamala Harris voter. Are they backing something that's particularly evil? I think so, right? That's my opinion.
You know what they
Um,
are? Average. Can I tell you what I think they are?
what?
Terrified.
Yeah, I'd agree. I would agree.
Right. And I mean, and you and I, we're garbage.
Well, apparently,
Did you know,
yeah.
by the way, I
This,
watched I watched this time and we watched this really closely the other day. I think it was Wednesday, that went up on our three-story segment, right? On Wednesday. He's reading that. He's reading that statement, Zach. Someone wrote that for him. I mean, you watch his black reptilian, Parkinson's impacted, medicated eyes. Joe Biden is reading that statement.
it it looks like it. It looks like
Which makes it worse.
it does, but it's one of the reasons why I'm doubting that he would read it, because that means the staff prepared that for him.
Oh, no, no. Oh, no, no. Oh, I think he's so far gone. I think he's so complete. And he could read that. Not, no, and I'll confess something to you. Now, this is a confession to this audience. I don't like polling data. I mean, I used to do it. I ran a big data company. I sold a big data company. At one point, I found it very interesting. But because I don't trust political polls, because I don't believe in the networks that do them, we used to, in radio, be told you have to do one polling show per week. Okay, so one day a week, you need to do a show that's intense on polling. I'm like, you're telling me as a program director, I need to talk about things I don't care about. And program director said, yes, but you're really good at it. You have really good insights on polling and data. You write a big, and this is a true thing. I did an hour on polling as prescribed. I argued it down to 1 hour, not a whole show, 1 hour. And I got done with that hour. And it was wrapping up the show. I wrapped up with a personal note like I used to do in radio. And I said to my producer, did anything I say make sense? He's like, what? I go, did anything I said today make any sense whatsoever? He goes, yeah, I thought it was a great show. It's very interesting. I go, dude, I had no idea. I mean, this was an autopilot show and I just turned my brain off. Biden's brain, I think, is medically off, man. And so, hey, sit down, read this. He can read it. And then probably 16, 17 minutes later, I think I called people garbage. Right.
Yeah, I the it's a strange, it's really a strange place that we've gotten ourselves into. Meaning, and it kind of goes into what we're talking about, like
Yep.
the vitriol the vitriol that is embodied in this. I mean, getting to the point where you're called. I mean, let's think about this. It's so we have a system and a media that is so focused on one side and not the other. The sitting U.S. president just referred to 50% of the U.S. populace as garbage.
And then the Politico said that he didn't say it. What they said is that he referred to the hatred of Trump supporters as garbage.
But the problem is that's not what he said.
I know. I know.
That's not what he said.
I know.
And now the White House has changed the transcript.
Which is illegal.
Yeah.
It's illegal to alter a presidential transcript.
Look, everybody, and see here's the political idiocy of the left right here. Okay. Everybody and their mother knows the guy's not right in his mind. Just come out and say he misspoke. Right? I mean, they're making it so much of a bigger, like it should be a big thing. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But just come out and say he misspoke.
Days before the election, they should just come along and say, you know what, we need to disclose something. He's got Parkinson's real bad. Like he doesn't know where he is. He thought he was Kamala Harris. When he was reading that, he actually thought he was Kamala Harris. We have an economy that's going to be affected by all this. And whoever wins or is installed, as it were, I need to talk with you about the way. There's a great article in the show notes. We won't get too into it because it's a really long article about how the government is constantly changing and altering economic data to make it look better. So we'll talk with Zach about this in a second. Since it's the economy, let me tell you this. I got this note from Jen at Radio America Sales, and it's forwarded from Bioptimizers. They're doing their November Black Friday sale, and last year it was nuts. This is, I don't know how they survived this way. So all their products, you go to bioptimizers.com and /Todd and use promo code Todd. Now that's important. Okay, you got to the promo code this time. Bioptimizers.com, use promo code Todd. You can unlock up to $100 in free gifts. Get an additional 10% off the special 3-product bundle. It's currently 15% off. That's a total of 25% off with code Todd. So this is unheard of savings from these guys. And there's a couple things that I want you to know about. Magnesium Breakthrough is back on special. This thing, for me, is the most magical sleep device because it's not a sedative. It doesn't knock you out like melatonin. You actually get good quality sleep. It also helps you relax. It helps control stress hormones like cortisol. This has, I think it's 7 of the critical forms of magnesium, all organic. None of it is fake. You go to the China marts, it's fake magnesium. This is all organic, all natural, and this helps control your quality of sleep as well as 600 other biochemical reactions. It also helps alleviate stress. That's in part of the 3-product bundle. So right now, choose your health this Black Friday. Go to bioptimizers.com/Todd, and remember, use code Todd and get an extra 10% off in the special 3-product bundle. Get your free gifts. It's bioptimizers.com/Todd. You got to use promo code Todd. Qualify for that chance to win up to $100 in free product from Bioptimizers. So, Zach, there's a great article at Zero Hedge about many of the ways that the government gaslights people about the economy, and it relates to unemployment numbers. It relates to inflation numbers. It relates to calculations of the GDP, taking this product set out. For instance, they were making the case that inflation had not gone up, but, oh, by the way, we removed staples like food and energy from the GDP data so that they could claim that, just like they did with the crime statistics, the FBI removing major cities from that. So how can we as Americans, how can we as Americans really make sure that we're not getting gamed? Like, what can we look around us and say, okay, the economy's in bad stead?
Man, that's a tough question. And in the past, in the past, a lot of times in the United States, you just look at the stock market and it would tell you the story.
Mm-hmm.
That's been gamed to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit tough, but this goes to one of the things that we've been talking about a lot. And there's an interesting article out here that I want to pull up for you exactly on this topic. It's funny because I just tweeted about this, but it says, it's from The Economist, and it says, quote unquote, sentiment is weak, almost at the level you might expect if the economy were in a state of recession. That's one of the biggest data puzzles out there. Okay, well, I can't tell you definitively. Whenever we're discussing the economy, people need to keep in mind, and you can agree, you can disagree with me all you want. I did at the beginning of my career, and I have learned over the last 16 or 17 years that whether I agree with it or not, it doesn't matter. This is true. There is no more dynamic, complex system uh, in the world that we now life is a more nature is technically a more complex system, but in terms of man-made systems, there really isn't a more complex system with more variables than an economy. The inputs are just incredible in terms of the numbers of them, which makes it why it's so hard to have economic predictions, right? But what we were saying was that that headline from the Economist does not surprise me at all. Why? Because you're running 7% deficits, meaning
Okay, you
when
got to explain this. You tweeted about this. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is so vital and important to understand. Let me stop quick with sentiment. You're saying sentiment is weak, so this is people's trust in the economy. So people,
yeah,
so the distributed wisdom and emotions of Americans are saying, "Hey, you know what? Things don't feel right."
yeah,
Okay, and then you're explaining this mathematically with these 7% deficits.
yeah. And quite honestly, sentiment indicators have been fairly good. Every data set has its good parts and bad parts.
Yeah.
There is no, and I repeat this, there is no 100% accurate economic indicator on the face of the earth. Period. Full stop. Okay.
Okay.
But sentiment indicators historically have been pretty good. They've been really bad over the last 12 to 13 years predicting recession. Why? There's several reasons why, but one of the biggest reasons, in my opinion, is that government and central banks have taken a much more central role. When you understand how we measure economic output, which is GDP, right, gross domestic product, and we've talked about this before on this show, and I've talked, but and I'm going to oversimplify it for the sake of brevity. But when you understand the way GDP is calculated, it really is the summation of virtually all transactions that happen inside of an economy over a given period of time. Okay, so when a government begins to spend 7% deficits, and when that government hit its deficits have averaged historically 1.5 to 2.5%, okay, that is going to set off, that is going to show GDP going up, right? Because it's pouring cash into a system, right?
I
But
just got it.
okay,
Just
okay,
before
good.
you said it, I'm like, oh, of course.
Yeah,
Deficit spending, 7%. Oh, look, ching. Every transaction. Oh, wow, we're good. This is adding up. This is economic activity.
right,
Paying our debts, or not even paying our debts, paying to float the interest on our debts,
right.
paying the credit card minimum every month, and not even that in our case, is economic activity.
Right. So what did we an easy way to look at this also
Wow.
is what did we see from the end of 2009 to 2020? Right? What did we see? We saw a stock market going ballistic, rich getting richer than they've ever been, record low wage gains for middle America, right? And record slow growth coming out of the well, why was that? Same basic dynamic, right? Because and here's the catch. This is why you'll get good economic readings with bad sentiment. Where does that deficit spending go to? It goes to companies and places where the government does business with. It doesn't filter through the economy like normal GDP would, right? Like, so let's say we have a productivity boom. Okay, all parts of the economy virtually are going to be impacted, usually in a positive way, from a productivity boom, whether it comes from the internet, new technology, whatever the case may be. Whereas with deficit spending, you're going to have the people that are or the people in corporations that are receiving that are beneficiaries of that deficit spending, and then you're going to have people that aren't, right? It's very bifurcated. And so what we would expect, and one of the things we were talking about is in a big deficit environment like this, we expect to experience periods of time with sentiment and household net worth and all these other things where it looks and feels like a recession, but GDP is still going up. And as deficits become bigger percentages of the economy,
Yeah.
that anomaly should become more and more present, right? Because it'll make the economy look less and less cyclical. Because that government spending is as steady as a clock,
Wow.
right?
So this is a massive economic lie. And if you're listening to this, by the way, versus watching it, Zach Abrahams with us, Chief Investment Officer, Bulwark Capital Management, knowyourriskreader.com. All right, let me expand this then. So the Bible tells us to be really, really careful about debt and usury. Maybe don't charge people usurious rates, and be ready to forgive loans and the 7-year jubilees. Whereas our society, if I understand this correctly, our 7% deficit is economic activity that softens a weak economy's appearance because, hey, look, it's economic activity. Ergo, then it would seem to me that one of the things that the central banks really like are people paying the monthly minimum on their credit cards because it's repeating cyclical economic activity that ain't ever going to stop. And sure, there's some bankruptcies here and there, but they don't really care about that
Mhm.
because this is just fringe cases. Plus, they're just little people. I mean, they're just ordinary folk. It doesn't really matter if they go bankrupt. So that revolving credit line thing, minimum balances on your tire credit card, your gas credit card, store credit cards, Visa, MasterCard, that's also economic activity, albeit stalemating, hamster wheel. I mean, usury, or if you like, it's almost like sharecropping in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, look, and it answers so many questions. And they're, look, again, these are very complex things. So is there more to it than this? Yes. But it's this is the lion's share, part of what we're seeing, right? Like, for instance, just all you have to do is go back and look at World War II. Go look what happened to gross domestic product in World War II. It went through the roof, right? That's the last time we were running 7% deficits. Okay, now a little bit different then because you didn't have automation, right? So literally every bit of that production, what was feeding back into the consumer's pocket, right? Because you had to have people making all of these goods. You didn't have machines doing it. You didn't have factories in China doing it, right? So the feedback loops were going right back into the main economy. Today, that's not the case. It's feeding right back into the corporation's hands, therefore the wealthy's hands. But now, is there some trickle down effect? Yes, there is. There is some trickle down effect. But what we're saying is, if if we look at a normal economy that, let's say, in America is growing at 4%, right? Everybody feels good. Okay, go back to 2006, 2007. We're cranking along 3.5% GDP, somewhere in there. Everybody felt good, right? Every part of the economy was doing well. It was about to get bad, but everybody felt good, right? How is it that we're today where GDP numbers are above that, household net worth and numbers are above that, wages have gone way up, and yet sentiment readings today are nothing like you saw in '06 and '07? Why is that? Well, because the delta between GDP and how it's affecting consumers is much larger than it was then because so much more of the GDP is government deficit spending, right? And that's not having, so on the surface of it, you go, well, the last time GDP was expanding like this, it was the best of times. We're like, yeah, but that was real GDP growth. That wasn't just deficit spending, right? So,
This is extraordinary for people to understand. We have built in our economy the most labyrinthine and broad set of perverse incentives that have ever existed in mankind's history.
and we've created an economic Potemkin village on top of it,
Okay, so
right?
some people know what Potemkin Village means. Other people don't. Alex Overall, who's a very smart young man, produces the show now because Diana's moving on to a bigger, better career, or different career, I should say. Bigger, better. It's bigger, better. Don't look at me that way, young lady. We're very proud of you. We're we're thrilled to have had you here. But so Alex doesn't know what Potemkin Village means.
Okay, so Potemkin Village goes back to the what would you call it? The I'm forgetting the name, but Russia, back to Russia when they had the czar, right?
Yep.
Um, and I'm forgetting exactly who it was, but Potemkin was like, or was it, no, was it Rasputin? Or I think it was named after the guy Potemkin. Anyway, he was like a Department of the Interior, kind of like a Rasputin like character,
Yeah.
and we really wanted to ingratiate himself with the czar, and it might have been actually been Catherine the Great. I got to go brush up on the story.
Yeah.
Anyway, long story short, he's supposed to be developing the interior. He's not doing a very good job, but what he does instead is he goes around the countryside setting up all of these false front buildings, right?
Yep.
And so then he drives through the country and he's showing the queen or the czaress or whatever,
Yeah.
like, hey, look at everything that we've done. Well, it was just a facade. It was like in old West towns, right? How they
Yeah.
have the false fronts.
Right.
Um, so yeah, so on the surface it looks like one thing, but when you look behind it, there's other. Now, I'm not saying it's fully a Potemkin village because the GDP readings are accurate. Okay, they're not falsified.
Oh, wait, hold it, please. I love you so much. You're the greatest economic mind I know. Until the government says, gosh, inflation's up. Could we go ahead and remove some of the measures like core items like, oh, I don't know, food?
Right, but that's inflation numbers.
Okay,
Different deal.
right. But the
Okay.
GDP is up. Okay, got that. But this other lever we look at, inflation, oh, that's mine. Fine. So GDP is everything. Inflation is all the things except the things you need to live.
Right. So those numbers affect what we call real GDP, which
Oh,
real GDP is the nominal growth number less inflation. Okay. So you got to minus inflation from it. That gives you a real number. But what I'm saying is the nominal GDP number is accurate. Okay. It is accurate. Okay. What isn't, in my opinion, and I think that there's a preponderance of evidence to back this up, is the inflation data. Okay. And we've talked about this on the show before. Well, if my inflation data is incorrect and it's understated, then my GDP number could be accurate and properly stated, but it's only as good as the inputs, right? So if my inflation data is incorrect and it's artificially understated, then GDP, real GDP, is going to come in artificially high, right? But it's not because they're screwing with the GDP number; it's they're messing with the inputs. Does that make sense?
yes. And I'm just thinking of God's word. I don't remember what psalm this is, but God uses the simple things to shame the wise and the weak things to shame the strong. So I'm listening to this, and what you just said is about 13 minutes of financial education that should be core to every single, I'm talking maybe ninth grade in a simplified form, all the way through high school every year to put on constant, as the youngs say, or on repeat, as us olds say. So people begin to understand not what just Potemkin Village means, but how this stuff has all been rigged. And Zach Abraham, knowyourriskradio.com, Chief Investment Officer, Bulwark Capital Management. Thank you for that explanation. And there's one other thing I want to ask you, and it relates to this. It's a carry on of this conversation, and it's about that GDP being complete. I'm going to push back on that. I contend it's not complete. And I'll tell you why I mean this in just a second, okay? Why I say that. There is a GDP that's moving outside this country. And it's part of what used to belong here is healthcare spending. Now, I know healthcare spending goes up all the time in the United States. Thomas Massey just showed this chart. Rand Paul's shown it. President Trump showed it on the Joe Rogan Experience. This chart where our spending on healthcare continues to skyrocket, and yet healthcare outcomes are continue to decline in this country. Well, that's because it's not healthcare. That's because healthcare is happening outside this country. Is happening outside this country. And when that occurs, we lose not just GDP, but we lose respect for our healthcare system. But it's not like the other countries are getting better. They're taking our stuff and using it better. In the case of Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, there's a healthcare clinic there I go to called Renew Healthcare. And they do one thing and they do it extraordinarily well. They source ethically gathered stem cells from placentas and umbilical cords. They pay for the entire birth cycle of the women, whether or not they use their stem cells, because they only accept about 10% of stem cells. And then they culture them in their lab in Mexico. They have invested in creating their own oxygen because they want to know exactly how pure it is. They don't want any supply chain issues. So they've invested a ton of money. I've stood in the room where they produce the oxygen. It's incredible. They have the largest hyperbaric chamber in North America. When you sit in that, it helps reduce inflammation immediately. After they inject you with the stem cells, it helps activate them, drive it into your muscle tissue. That's all happening in Mexico. It helps people avoid surgeries, recover so much faster. It even can correct traumatic brain injuries, violent injuries like horse riding accidents, car accidents. It's amazing. And here it's illegal because our government wants to burn placentas and umbilical cords. So that portion of our GDP is where it belongs in a healthcare clinic, albeit in Mexico, which is in Puerto Vallarta, the safest city in Mexico. I totally endorse these guys. Go to renew.healthcare. It's RENUE.healthcare. They'll hook up with your doctor here and see your MRIs, your CAT scans, figure out if they can help you, and they'll tell you if they can. And if they cannot, they'll say, sorry, we can't. It's renew.healthcare. So Zach, let me just push back ever so gently on this idea that our GDP is accurate. All right. How much are we earning on fentanyl in the country, street fentanyl? Now, think about this, and sex trafficking, and how much underground labor is going on in terms of illegal immigration, how much extortion, and how much actual money laundering. So let's start with the big one, like drugs. Drugs is a multi-hundred-billion-dollar business at probably 600 billion. Sex trafficking globally is approaching that. And America is one of the top centers for sex trafficking, sadly. There's what, 600 billion plus 600 billion. You're starting to talk about some like fairly large money.
Yeah. Yeah, those are what we call statistically significant figures.
Okay. Statistically significant figures. Is there anything in finance that actually tracks that? Or is there any way to know we know what's going on. We could take that data and apply it, I guess. Should that be included in economic numbers? Because you've said, and you've taught me to believe, that a nation's economy is a sign of its morals, and a moral is a sign of its economy.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, man. That's one I've never gotten before. So
Well, let's start with an easy one. Should it be included in our GDP?
probably, okay, there's two ways to approach this topic.
Okay.
One that is purely analytical,
Okay.
and one that is more cultural and morality based. So let's start with the purely analytical one.
Okay.
Probably
Should have
not.
separate music for this one, like the Jeopardy theme. And then afterwards, we'll get to AC/DC Back in Black or something. Okay. So,
Right.
so you're going to say analytically.
Yeah, so what I would say is probably not on an analytical basis, and the reason why would be because these are what we'd refer to as off ledger or off. I mean, look, I hate talking about this stuff because this is, the ruining, the absolute ruining of human lives, the destruction of human spirits. It's horrific, right? But if we want to look at it through an analytical lens, these are what we'd refer to as off balance sheet or off ledger transactions, meaning they're the multiplier effect on that economic activity is going to be substantially different than the multiplier effect off of normal economic activity.
Mhm.
Meaning that the money that is produced from those activities is not going to flow to in nearly as many hands.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of it is going to be pushed back outside of the country, so it will have way less downstream positive impacts. So if I was sitting there, if somebody asked me to conduct GDP and calculate those numbers into it, I would probably initially, now the data might take you somewhere else, but initially my approach would be something like, okay, here's what we believe the gross number is. Now we're gonna adjust that number because it isn't gonna transact like normal GDP, right? So you would want to discount it to some degree, right?
Got
Um,
it.
just because a lot of that money is going to be moved out of the system. It's not going into banks. It's not creating tax revenue.
Oh, it's not going into our banks
Right, right,
till it's
right,
laundered.
right.
And
So so
okay,
you so you might, what, as we sit here and talk about it, Todd, you know what, honestly, and you factor drugs into it, it's probably a negative GDP impact.
because of it leaving the country, being laundered.
Right.
But there are banks here who know they're laundering this.
Right, and the cost. Well, and remember, the costs assigned by both are still being the costs that are inherent in both, right? Both societally, law enforcement wise, right? All these other costs, those costs are still realized. The profit is not. It's moved. Yeah, yeah. So it's
Profits move, except there are US banks that know they have high risk transactions and they know it's laundering.
yep,
They know it's cartel money, but they'll look the other way for their percentage. It's the same thing that we've talked about in New York City, in other cities. In fact, Eric Adams, he called this out. You know, I don't want to say the mayor of New York is getting red pilled, but ever since he made the tremendous mistake of speaking truth about mass illegal immigration in his city, and he was in the back end saying, "Guys, help me here. I need some money. Ship them out of here, man. People see what we're doing. This is affecting my political career."
yeah,
And Eric, be fine. You're in a Democrat city. We're going to take care of you. So when he told them, he said that now the DOJ is investigating him. He actually came out and he wants to house these people in neighborhoods. He just wants them out of the city, man. He wants give people bonuses to put them in, build a spare bedroom and your additional dwelling unit. But he said something that we and I've talked about. He said there are banks that are taking a rake for the money they hand out to illegal immigrants. It's so just think of this. We are taxed by force. It's taken from us, given to government bureaucrats who, number one, pay themselves. Number two, stock up for their retirement, guaranteed pensions no one else gets. Then they take that money and they give it to banks. And the banks go, sweet, thank you. Oh, we're going to have some management fees on top of this. I mean, it shouldn't top out. It's probably not more than 7%. To do what? So put it in our account and then give people a 6-cent plastic rectangle that's a debit card. And yeah, we've got some infrastructure stuff, ATMs, et cetera. Probably costs us up to 1/100% each time you scan the card.
If that, yeah.
If that. And that economic activity, I mean, it's tracked, but is it really tracked given the opportunity loss? I mean, you think about, and we don't talk about this. This is also an interesting question.
Well, yeah, that's also so if we just look at money going to especially illegal immigrants,
Yeah.
same thing. That is an economic activity black hole. And the reason why I say that is because so the banks are still making money on it. So that's going to count toward GDP. Right?
Right.
Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? The banks benefit from it,
Right.
but almost nobody else does. Right. And the reason for that is just simply when you look at the amount of money earned or given to illegal immigrants by the government or what through their job or whatever, a disproportionate amount of that money gets shipped back to wherever they're from on average, right? So that is like a transporting of GDP outside the system.
But there's a rake. There's a rake. Western Union takes a rake. Venmo
Yep,
takes a rake. PayPal
yep,
takes a rake. Everybody takes a rake except us.
yep,
What's that whole
yep.
saying about when you arrive at you're playing a poker game? You're sitting there,
No, not yeah, and you can't spot the sucker at the table. You're the sucker.
right?
Not only are we not taking a rake, we're paying for it. We're paying for it, right? We're paying for it in so many ways. We're paying for it in higher inflation, less housing availability. We're paying for it in we're actually paying for it, right? So it's
Right.
actually our dollars that are being given to these people.
Right.
And now let me flip over. This is not an argument against immigration, right? We need immigration. Our immigration is one of the cornerstones that has made this country great. Um, and that that is the fiber of the United States, and it's one of our largest advantages going forward. But we're that's not what we're doing, right? In my opinion, this is not a push for better immigration. This is the dissolution of sovereign borders, right?
But it's something else, and that's such an interesting point that this has come along in an economic discussion. And I want to get to this. So remind me to get back on that exact point about immigration and mass immigration and something else, because it should be that immigration should be a supply and demand topic. It should be a supply and demand topic, but it's not. There's something else going on. We'll talk about this with Zach Abraham. As we're talking about the economy and we're talking about how rigged it is or isn't, and it is, it's clearly rigged. You can continue to do a lot of business with people who rigged the economy or not, particularly just in a staple item, soap. Let's take that for instance. Just for instance. I mean, it's not like I have a soap company to talk about, but just take for instance soap. You're going to buy it for the rest of your life, and you want to be, unless you want to be a stinking, disgusting, filthy hippie who walks into video studios and stands there with his arms crossed like he's the boss. Actually, we should put this guy in camera. Really should see if he'll come over on camera. Or you could go to Allen Soaps. Allen Soaps is all natural soap made in America. It's created by a family with 3 generations of soap making expertise. And the soap is extraordinary. It's invented by a young guy named Alan, who is nonverbal, essentially, because of autism, has all these structural health concerns. I kid you not when I tell you that the doctors looked at Alan as a little tiny fetus in mom's belly and said, "Why don't we?" And his parents said, "No, no." So the soap company exists to give Alan a job. Now his brother Ian works there. He's also got autism. And another young lady, and imagine how heartbreaking this is. She was neurotypical and then got autism late in life. Man, it's so frustrating. She works there. She thrives. So it's far bigger than the soap. So make the decision, be a stinking hippie, drop the soap altogether, in which case you're an outcast and we don't love you. Well, we still love you, but you stink. Or go with the corporate entities that don't care about you. Or just do this. Go to allensoaps.com/Todd, get 10% off all their products there and just make a commitment, man. I'm not going to deal with these rigged economies. Zach Abrams with us, Chief Investment Officer, Bulwark Capital Management. So Zach, we were talking about immigration. You made the great point that you're not making an argument against immigration, but let me say this.
No.
It's not just the dissolution of our borders. It's the dissolution of our electoral college. We got that. People all understand that now. And to say otherwise is a ridiculous claim. But it's also the importing of ideas and attitudes and behaviors. And it used to be by virtue of people going, man, I want to get to America. Why? Right? Because, man, I want to compete to get in America because there I can start a business. There I can have religious freedom, liberty. There I can pursue life, liberty, and happiness. There that's guaranteed by the Constitution. It's unalienable. They recognize that God created it. Man, I want to rush into this competition to get to America. So what did we get? We got to sit back and go like an elite college, right? And elite colleges used to care about your behaviors and your attitudes. Now they only care about that if you're white. Well, this wasn't really a 4.0. I mean, it was a 4.0000001 or 3.99999. Just to keep the white people out. We in our country no longer have this competition to get in. So
Yeah,
it should be supply and demand.
yeah, and to argue, this may not be the best analogy, but to
Okay.
argue the opposite to me is to make the argument that, and it's not crude, but bear with me for a second. It would be not admitting that and not acknowledging that relationship would be like saying, um, hey, I want a girl, I want a wife. I want to try to find somebody I'm going to marry, right? So somebody looks at you and goes, well, you need to get around big groups of people, and you're like, okay, well, I was invited to a church, but I was also invited to a swinger convention. Both are going to be good to look for wives, right? You're like, well, look, both places will have people there looking for other people, but for completely different reasons, right? And I feel like that's one of the things that's gotten lost in the immigration debate is that, first of all, there's a lot of people on either sides of the debate that say really stupid things. But the intention, right? What are they showing up because they want to be at a swinger convention, or are they showing up because they want to find a spouse? And in the past, the way our country was set up with look, and I'm not saying there shouldn't be social safety nets. I think there should be. I think that we use them incorrectly. But when people were immigrating here from Ireland, at the beginning of or right before the 20th century, at the beginning of the 20th century, they weren't coming here to get an ATM, a free cell phone, and a guaranteed job. Okay, that's not why they were coming here. They were coming here because they wanted the freedom to be what they could be, right?
Right.
So that was like the equivalent of going to the church to look for the spouse. So now we're saying, hey, it's a swingers convention, and we're shocked that a bunch of people that have no interest in adding to the productivity of the country are showing up,
Right.
right? And that's now, is that writ large? Of course not. But what I'm saying is you've perverted the incentives. Once you pervert the incentives, you should not be surprised
But you see
that,
perverts.
yeah, and when Trump makes his outrageous or seemingly outrageous comments about, it's the worst of people, he's correct. Like, that's not the summation of people coming in, but you have a much higher percentage of those people immigrating to the United States than would have in the past because
Particularly,
the incentives are different.
right,
It's a crucial statement.
no, the incentives are, wait, I get $10,000 free cash, $2,200 a month.
What if you made that same offer to every American? You know how tourism in New York State would go up and go through the roof,
Right.
right? So of course you're not going to get the same quality of people with the same aims coming through the border. You're just not.
Yeah. And it's not racism to say that. It's human nature. It's human nature. That's the
Human condition. It has nothing to do with race or where you're from.
So we're going to go rapid fire through some of the things you tweeted, as hard as that's going to be. But you can be Professor Zach, but in truncated form, because some of this stuff is intense and interesting. Well, it's all interesting. But we'll go rapid fire through this. And you, like me, can use Bone Frog coffee for rapid fire, but not Bone Frog wine. Because when you get the Bone Frog wine, you get the Biden brain. Now, don't go get drunk on the wine. Tim did not create, and by the way, he does not sell wine bongs. Did you ever, I did that once.
I'm a wine guy.
Okay. Did you need Bone Frog sellers?
I got to get some Bone Frog.
You got to get Bone Frog sellers. Did you ever beer bong wine?
No, I beer bonged a lot of beer.
Okay, so I got the idea one night when I was not at, but hanging out at North Idaho College. I thought it would be a good idea to beer bong a bottle of Cabernet.
Now, I would have probably told when I was the same age you
Yeah,
were when you did that,
yeah.
I probably would have agreed.
You know what? I've never been more sick. I've never been more sick. And I'm talking about, well, no, that's not true. The 39 kamikazes in an hour and a half in Seattle.
Sweet Moses.
Yeah, that was the stomach pumping. That was the thing where it seemed like a good idea to us, this guy and I who took this stuff, and we ended up fighting later. He and I had wrestled against each other in high school, and we both weighed about 220 at that time. So we fought wrestling and turned into a fight upstairs in the frat house. Frat houses are so disgusting. And we broke the walls.
Oh,
I,
I was good. Yeah.
we just like destroyed the hallway. They kicked us out. And this guy's name was Eric. And he and I decided it would be a good idea after having been kicked out of their frat house. We walked along and there was a dance going on at another frat. So we thought it'd be a good idea to sneak in, being that it was a private dance between a sorority and a frat. Uh,
Again, I would have agreed with that being a good idea.
and then we climbed the water pipes and got onto the third floor was the first open window we could find. So we're hanging off the water pipes. We sneak in and then we go downstairs because who's going to notice at a private dance, which, by the way, a formal dance. And here we are in torn sweatpants. And then we further thought it was a good idea to accept the offer from the brothers in that fraternity. You guys can leave or we'll help you out. Try it.
Oh yeah.
So when I woke up in the hospital and there's black stuff on my chest and with the thing in my mouth and I try to talk
Yeah.
and they eventually, they had to put activated charcoal in it. So that's a good time to talk about bone fog cellars. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's as good a time as any.
Because we're adult human beings. I don't drink wine, but you like it. A lot of my dear friends love wine. So Tim, just like with the coffee, he consulted wine experts to teach him how to make the wine. There was the 2015 vintage we had at our house, and friends of mine who absolutely love wine, absolutely loved this wine. My friends who are casual drinkers of wine loved it. My daughter, who's very brand new to wine, because she's not legally allowed to have it, she thought it was delicious as well. So you can go, but she had a half a glass. She can wine bong in her own time. Pray to God she doesn't. Go to bonefrogsellers.com/Todd, bonefrogsellers.com/Todd. Get 10% off their wines there. And yes, of course, 10% of proceeds goes to the Navy SEAL Foundation to help the families of fallen Navy SEALs. Zach, let's go through some of these tweets real quickly, rapid fire style. You retweeted something from Anthony Pompliano. Man, I wish I had that name. I'd love to walk around. People say, what's my name? It's Anthony Pompliano.
You can call me Pomp. Here's my buddy's circumstance.
Unrealized losses at U.S. banks are 7 times higher than during the 2008 financial crisis. And this is from Cointelegraph. Insane. And I forgot to grab your response to this, but okay, unrealized gains, loss. That's such a weird thing. Unrealized gains, meaning losses on investment securities, 7 times higher than during the 2008 financial crisis. Okay, unpack that for us in like 3 minutes.
So, I don't agree with the guy's conclusion to or what he does with that, but that just has to do with the collateral on the bank's balance sheets. They own tons of treasuries and bonds. Interest rates have went up.
Yep.
Whether we're talking about commercial real estate papers gotten hammered. So banks are sitting on really beat up paper. But remember, if that, so the Fed's washing it for them. But there's a lot of stuff that's underwater on bank balance sheets because rates have gone up and yeah.
Got it. Okay. So then there's this. This is from Bravos Research warning banks are still tightening credit conditions. Such conditions have preceded recession since 1990. This time is no different. And you wrote back, what we're lacking in credit creation is being more than accounted for with the 7% deficits. That's what you just explained, right?
Yep.
Just explain that the deficit spending is it's a plus to our economy because, hey, look, economic activity.
Well, yeah, 100%. And then you look at the way they define a recession, right? A recession is 2 consecutive quarters of declining GDP. And so what our argument has been when you're running deficits this high, you could absolutely be in a quote unquote recession, okay, where the purchasing power of in a recession, technically the purchasing power of your money goes up because asset prices fall. But you could have a recessionary type impact, a recessionary type feel economically in this country and yet still be showing GDP levels that are going up every year.
Got it. Okay. And then last thing is actually good news, as I see it. The Kobasi letter, I didn't say that. I think Kobasi letter. The U.S. dollar's share of global payments hit 49%, the most in 12 years, according to SWIFT data. Over the last 2 years, U.S. dollar usage in international payment transactions has jumped by 9 percentage points. And you're right. Appears as though the inevitable collapse of King Dollar is upon us. LOL. And I get that. That's pretty easy to parse. But the rest of the world knows that our books are cooked.
Yeah, so are theirs.
Okay, got it. So we
So-
cook a better book.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, we just have a more dynamic, more complete economy, right? So and this is the point I've been trying to make to people, and people always take it the wrong way. They think that I don't understand the debt situation, that I'm not disgusted by it, like I'm sitting here saying no big deal. I'm not at all saying that. Well, one of the jokes I've got with a good buddy of mine that runs a fund is our joke is the ultimate form. So if we take inflationary or not liking the dollar or an anti-dollar position, if we take it to its ultimate extreme, if we go far enough out on that curve, you end up thinking the dollar is going to go up. Okay. And the reason why is you start to understand when we talk about currencies going up or down, we're talking about them in relationship to other currencies. And so a really quick litmus test on this is you look at somebody and you go, okay, you think the dollar is going to imminently collapse? What other currency are you going to put your money into? Okay. And nobody has an answer. Why? Because those play whatever we're saying about the US economy. Let's go look at Japanese books. Let's go look at Chinese books. Let's go look at Eurozone books. Let's take into fact that the US economy or the United States is the only country in the world that are net exporters of food and fuel. Right. And you're sitting there saying, yes, I think what we're doing is insanity. I think what we're doing is going to lead to the eventual loss of the dollar as the world reserve currency. But it's not going to lead to a collapse of the dollar against other currencies because it is still the cleanest dirty shirt. And it just is.
Yep.
So
Got it.
and we've been making that argument for a long time. And here we go. More proof of it, right? Oh, the dollar's in a minute collapse. Well, go look. Dollar transactions which means more people are trusting the dollar in financial transactions today than they were even 4 years ago.
Yep. Well said. Got it. Thank you, Zach, Chief Investment Officer, Bulwark Capital Management. Say hi to your beautiful family. We miss you in the high mountains of free America. If you buy some of that wine, don't bong it. But let me know what you think of that.
Oh, yeah, no, we'll be sipping.
Okay.
We will be sipping.
Very good.
Yeah.
I'm sure Tim will be relieved to hear that. Lord, thank you for providing us, dear friends, particularly Zach Abraham, Chief Investment Officer, Bulwark Capital Management. I think I said that twice in about 6 seconds. Lord Jesus, thank you for reminding us about wise counsel, about using simple things to shame the wise. This is the Todd Herman Show. Please go be well, be strong, be kind. Please make every effort to walk, as Alex ever so gently raises the music, to walk in the light of Christ.